Well, here we are. Book 7. Can you believe it? 7. It's a little. I can do this. That's, that's pretty bad. Never done this. There you go. So we are on book 7. I'm almost finished. I've got one more book. And then I can go back to my TBR pile. And once I get through my TBR pile, I can get back to the Eileen Wilkes series that I started a couple of weeks ago. So we have An Art Lover's Guide to Paris and Murder. And oh, by the way, welcome to the D. Louise book series. I'm Christine Karras, Tina. This is where we read books, talk about books, no special effects, no theme music, none of that fancy stuff going on here. And so we know about George Hazelton and Frances, who are now married. They've been married not quite a year yet. And they were supposed to go on a honeymoon a while back, but then they had a murder mystery to solve. So they get a letter from George's long lost aunt that was hiding out in Paris because she had some secrets that she didn't want the rest of the family to know. It later becomes quite knowledge that the rest of the family knew some stuff. It wasn't all secret. Some of the stuff had slipped through to family members. But she was doing all this stuff in Paris and she didn't want the family to know. So anyway, she calls George. She sends George a letter saying she requested his presence in Paris. So he goes to Frances and George go to Paris, and Julia wants them to investigate the murder of a friend of hers. And then when they get to Paris, she has cold feet and decided she doesn't want them to investigate the murder. The police had originally cleared it an accident. The guy had been on a houseboat and he had fallen overboard. And that was the story, that he had fallen overboard. But after George and Frances get there and they start talking to this Inspector Countess, and Julia gets murdered herself after cops out and doesn't tell them much. They have dinner and Julia avoids the entire situation, doesn't tell them much at all. But then she gets murdered, and the cops stop looking at them and they start doing these questions and they get more involved in the case, and they meet all of Julia's friends, and she was an artist. She was doing some painting, and she hung out with Martine and Eduardo and Martine and this Paul guy. And apparently, way back when, Paul and Julia were an item. And it depends. Everybody has their own version of the story. Everybody has a different version of it. One version was that they were star-crossed lovers, but his parents forbid the marriage. Her parents were going to allow it. His parents forbid it. Other people say he just didn't want to marry her. He wanted to do something else. Everybody has their own story of the situation. But anyway, apparently, Julie was with child. So that's why she went to Paris, to hide the child. So the kid's pushing 15 or so right now. So anyways, Paul is now deceased, and Julia wanted them to look into the case, but now Julia is also deceased, and Paul's wife, Gabrielle, knew about the kid and wants to immediately take possession of the kid's estate and whatever financial means she has, because on the surface, Gabrielle is supposed to be really quite rich. So we're not too sure as to why she's trying to go after the kid's estate, because it probably isn't that much. And she beats George and Frances to the punch of informing the kid of her mother's deceased and her father's deceased, and she has a poor attitude of Frances most of the time, and she does a few teenage rebellious things she does. So in the meantime, George and Frances investigate the murder. They talk to all the different people that worked in their building, all the different artists in the building. They get friendly with several different people. They discover there's more going on to this case than meets the eye. Frances also left them a painting. It's a solid black painting. And so they got to take it to an expert to have the painting removed to see what was under the painting, to see what it actually showed. And that's a mystery to the end of the book. But it turns out that George was left guardian of Lisette, the child. And he knew about the kid about a year to 2 years previously when his aunt called him to Paris to take care writing up the will and signing all the guardianship papers and planning for the future for the kid and all this kind of stuff. And it also turns out that Julia had a little bit of a perfumery thing. And it also turns out that due for bogus reasons that they talked about in the book, she didn't have any of the fragrances patented. So that was kind of a little wishy-washy there. I was questioning that. There's a couple of questioning moments in the book. So, we have all her different friends, and we also meet Alyssa. And if you don't know Alice Stoke Whitney is the lady that was in bed with Francis's husband when he had his heart attack and died. But, so, and George is the person that helped them move the body from Alice's bed back to Francis's bed so that the cops would think that the guy died in Francis's bed and not his mistress's bed. But Miss Alicia Stoke Whitney is having a good time over in Paris because her husband just ended it back in England because he was doing nefarious stuff too. So we got to get to know Lisette, the child. But she also has a nanny who may or may not have a secret identity and a secret reason behind all the stuff that goes on. So, and then we have Musin Allard, who is friendly with Gabrielle. And he was also the person that was handling Paul's estate finances. Because according to his solicitor, Paul was quite broke. But according to his art friends, Paul had a few dollars. He was selling a lot of paintings and he was making a good business. And according to his family, he was only getting a little bit of an allowance. So the two stories were like, well, this hand says he's kind of wealthy, and this hand says he's kind of broke. Which is it? What's going on? Is someone embezzling his funds? What secrets are going on there? So they get involved in the Frances and George get involved in the murder investigation, and they're staying at Leo Kendrick's parents' house. Leo married her her sister Lily last year. So, and they're out of town, so they're allowing George and Frances to stay at their house when they're away. So we need to know who killed Paul. And when the police look into the investigation, when George and Frances make a stink about it, they reopen the case and they have Paul's body autopsied, and apparently he was dead before he hit the water. Apparently he'd been bashed over the head. So now it's a murder investigation, and now they're investigating. Then someone was actually filming the incident where Julia there's a whole bunch of people crossing this bridge, and the bridge collapses, but Julia isn't crushed in the stampede. She's knifed in the back. And so they look at the film, and there's no evidence. They can't find Julia in the film. They can't find her. They go through it. They question her art friends several times. Who was having an affair with who was sleeping with who knew what about Lisette, who knew what about Lisette and when, what's Christine's part in all this, because they see Christine sneaks out of the house at one point and has a secret rendezvous with somebody, and she denies the whole thing. She, doesn't tell them the answers to their questions when they ask. There is a big reveal at the end. There's some good twisty turnies at the end. There's a lot of details at the end to be divulged, and the reason behind what happened, and who's involved, and what's going on with the case. So George and Frances got their hands full. They got to figure out what to do with Lisette. They're going to take her back to England and let her meet the rest of the family, because she hasn't met the rest of the family. And what to do about Christine. Christine's probably going to stay on as a nanny for a while, although there's a big reveal about her at the end. So she may be doing some other things too. And they have to question all her art friends and see who is it Gabrielle? Is it Lucian? Is it Eduardo? Is it Martine? Did Alicia Stoke Whitney have it involved in it? What's going on with the case? Who murdered Paul Ducasse? And who married Julia? And who makes attempts on a few other people's lives? A few other people something happens to them because they may or may not know too much. And they have to be dealt with because maybe they know too much. So we'll have to see what happens. So, we got the one more book to go, an art lover's guide to Paris and murder. And we shall read tomorrow a daughter's guide to mother and murder. And then we've got a to be read pile to tackle. We've got about 4 or 5 books in that pile right now. It may get bigger tomorrow. But I had stumbled upon this series and just delved right in and ran with it. So don't forget to check out tomorrow. Well, not tomorrow. On Saturdays, JD Robb, Eve Dallas for spoiling characters. I made a list, so it's in depth. D. Louise book series. I listed all the reviews that I did a couple years ago. And then this year we're spoiling all the characters. We're talking about the characters. We're not talking plot or the book or the case. We're just spoiling characters. Don't forget If Then Fridays. If you like this book, then you might like that book. And Star Trek Next Generation recaps and Star Trek Voyager recaps. And also Flashback Mondays. And don't forget Unboxing Sundays. And stay tuned. Have a good one.